very warm welcome to everyone. I know we've got a lot of people tuning in, so in these troubled times, a very warm welcome to you all. And I'm delighted to say that our guest tonight is Grant Simmer, someone who we know very, very well. He joined the CYC in 1987 and last year was inducted into the CYC Hall of Fame. But his sailing record is stellar, there's no doubt about that. And it's primarily based around the America's Cup, it's fair to say. Not only a winner on the water, but a winner off the water in his management and designing roles. And we go back to 1983, of course, when he was navigator on Australia 2 and that famous victory in Newport, Rhode Island. But we'll talk a bit about that a bit later in the show. But presently, he's the CEO of the British Challenge for the America's Cup, the INEOS team, it's called, the INEOS, and we'll hear about that as well. You can see that in the background with Grant when he comes on. And he's back in Australia at the moment because, as I say, these troubled times. So, Grant, a very warm welcome. Just bring us up to date where you are now with the British Challenge in the close down of the world, basically.
Thanks, Pete, and good evening, everyone. It's a tricky time for us. We were set up in Cagliari in Sardinia, sailing our first boat, and we'd been doing a lot of work on the design of the second boat, which is about 2/3 of the way through construction at the moment at Carrington Boats in Hythe in England. And as the situation with the virus got worse, we closed down in Cagliari and shipped the boat and moved all the people back to the UK and scattered people around the world like myself.
So, Grant, sorry if I could interrupt there. That was going to be the first test event when all the teams came together, challenges.
Yeah, there was an event that was on at the end of April, which, as this evolved, had to be cancelled. And then a subsequent event in the beginning of June was cancelled in Portsmouth. So our boat is in the shed back in the UK now in Portsmouth. Within the social distancing rules, we've got quite a lot of people working there. 40 odd people at Carrington's working a double shift arrangement, trying to maintain that distance. And then a bunch of people working at the base in Portsmouth as well. But we're trying hard to get out sailing in a couple of weeks, and things, they're backing off the restrictions in the UK, but the situation in the UK is not great, and it hasn't been great. A few of our guys are heading back to the UK at the moment, guys from the States and from Australia. And if you're a resident of the UK, you're allowed to travel. So I'm actually planning to travel in the next couple of weeks.
And will you have to isolate when you get there? I mean, like a 14-day close
Not
down?
at the moment. They're saying they're going to introduce that in the UK on the 1st of June. But to come back into Australia or New Zealand in September, October, you'll have to isolate. We're hoping that they can maybe overcome that with testing and, a process of testing as well as a period of isolation. So maybe we could reduce the 14 days, but that hasn't happened yet.
So how are you finding it back here and dealing with England over there? I mean, is it, I suppose with modern technology, it's a lot easier, but still a bit difficult, I guess, for you, is it?
Yeah, it is. The time difference, it's a difficult, and it's time I got back, and it's just a matter of dealing with that with the family as well.
Yeah, sure. Well, the America's Cup is, it's set down for March the 6th next year in Auckland. Is there any word or talk about that perhaps being delayed or postponed or pushed back?
No, the Kiwis have, Dalton and his team have basically consistently said, we want to hold the Cup on schedule. And the New Zealand government have been quite silent on that, which is frustrating to ourselves, the Americans, and to the Italians. They haven't sort of come out and said it's definitely on. And the other thing that they haven't done is Australians don't need a work visa to work in NZ, but they haven't told us that they're going to give us work visas. So we don't know when we can enter New Zealand. And yet we're already needing to get a sort of a forward party of people there to get the base set up, start things happening. So it's been, I mean, New Zealand government, all governments have got more important things on their plate than the America's Cup, but we're hoping they could spend a moment to give us an indication to tell us when our work visas can be processed and when we can get into New Zealand. And it's hard for us to plan without that advice.
But I see the American magic have bitten the bullet. They've put all their assets on a ship this week and shipping them to New Zealand already. I mean, that's a pretty big gamble, isn't it? I mean, whether they'll get in or not.
They're hanging it out there, yeah. They're hanging it out there, and they're getting a bit shitty. They're getting a bit shitty with the Kiwis, who, you know, don't mind playing a competitive game. So I don't think they're in any hurry to tell us when those visas are going to be issued and when, in fact, you can go to New Zealand. There's no question that when you get there, you're going to have to quarantine for 14 days.
Sure.
So I'll just stress, you know, the New Zealand government obviously have done a good job locking the place down. They've got to protect the population first and foremost, and our event may not be high on their priorities, but it'd be nice to get a little bit of news so that we can plan with some surety, you know?
Yeah. Well, Grant, tell us about these new boats, these AC-75s. I mean, we've never seen them before. They, you know, the video clips we've seen and the still photos, they look absolute weapons. I mean, give us an idea of speed and what's it like. I mean, you've obviously sailed on the first boat, but just give us an overview.
It's pretty edgy, actually. They're pretty edgy. Very impressive upwind, because there's a lot of riding moment. When you've got your foil canted all the way out, there's a lot of riding moment. So you're in the region of 32 knots upwind, 32, 33 knots upwind. So pretty impressive uphill. Downwind, the foils are quite small, so you're limited to the cavitation speed of your foils. So I don't think we'll see many boats doing more than 50 knots downwind. So the Sail GP boats, the AC50s from the last Cup with the new generation of foils can go over 50 knots downwind. It'll be hard to push these boats over 50 knots just because of the cavitation speed of the foils. But downwind we're in the region of, you know, mid-40s, and upwind 32 or so, 31.
So some serious speed. Let's just talk about the hulls of these boats. I mean, obviously you want to get the hull out of the water as quick as you can and foil. So the hulls look all different, very different between all the syndicates. Where does the shape of the hull come into play? I mean, obviously you're not going to be down speed and sitting off your foils, but once you're up on your foils, what part does the hull play? Does that make sense? I mean,
yeah.
I mean, you've got to house the crew and control the mast.
But like the boat behind me there, it was designed where we only had 3 months to design it, and we didn't really know what time of the day. We were looking at the wind speeds in Auckland, thinking like a 1 o'clock start. So that boat was designed to actually sail okay in displacement mode. But then if you look at the Kiwi boat and the Italian boat with a pretty substantial bustle, they weren't really designed to sail in a displacement mode. And the start time in New Zealand now is 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So in New Zealand, you either get a sea breeze, which is stronger in the afternoons, either southwest or northeast, can come in over the Gulf or over the city. And And so basically, those boats are designed for a touchdown, but never really to sail in displacement mode. So, but both the New York Yacht Club boat and our boat are designed to sail okay in displacement mode.
So when would you envisage displacement mode? I mean, in up to what wind strength, or down to what wind strength?
Under, at masthead, under about 8 knots. It's pretty unlikely with a 4 o'clock start.
So I think reading between the lines, it'd be fair to say that probably the second boat from a lot of syndicates will be significantly different in hull shape to the number one boat, the first boat.
They might be, Pete.
Right. Okay. Right. We'll move on. Okay. Now let's talk about the foils. The foils themselves are a common foil. Every boat's got the same. That's correct, is it?
The foil arm. The foil arm itself.
Foil arm, yes.
The canting foil arm is common, and we're making a Persico in northern Italy, and those foil arms are the same. You can change the trailing edge, but the rest of them are, structure and the shape and the leading edge is basically fixed.
And there's not a heavy weather one and a light weather one. It's just one size.
No, but the wing that goes on the end of the foil arm, like if you look at the end of the T part,
yes,
can vary. And so we're all developing those.
Okay.
And they have to fit in a box, which is in the class rule. And so the foil only cans, and those T's are wings with a flap on it. So we're adjusting the flap to vary the lift as we go through the speed range.
So each boat will be different there. You can design your own and develop it the way you want.
They've got to fit in the rule box, but they're different.
And the rudders?
And the rudders, there's there's some limits on the span of the rudder, and a little bit of a limitation on what your elevator looks like. But the elevators on these boats are primarily just providing trim, and most of the vertical force is coming from the foil.
Mm-hmm. Now sails, all soft sails?
Yeah. It's a sore point with me because last cup, we had wings. Last 2 cups, we had the wings, which allow you a lot of control of the shape. These boats, like a catamaran, like particularly a falling catamaran, you need a lot of camber to get going, a lot of force to get going. But once you do get going, you need to lower the center of effort very effectively in the mainsail or in the sail plan. So the wing allowed us to do that very well, and almost we had negative twist a lot of the time in the top of the wings, and we really could camber up the bottom of the wings. But this class has a D-shaped mast, literally a D-shaped mast, and then 2 membranes off the back of the D. And the idea is that you can camber up the leeward side and flatten the windward side. So you vary the amount of camber. Mm-hmm. And you also have a mechanism in the top, so you can force the twist into the top of the mainsail.
And are the masts, sorry, are the masts common or?
Masts common shape with a minimal structural requirement.
Right. And what about the sails? The sails one design, or can you go anywhere for your sails?
No, you can go. Well, there's some rules, but you can do whatever you want in terms of the structure. Fair bit of freedom in the leach profile, and areas restricted. And
downwind sails, where do we go there?
Well, you have a code 0. You've got quite a big bowsprit on these boats, and a code 0, but you carry a code 0 upwind in light airs. So sheeting what that sail looks like, there's a lot of golf left in that hole, a lot of development.
Yeah.
The Italians originally launched with a bowsprit not capable of carrying a code 0. They subsequently modified it, and then actually broke the bow off the boat.
Snapped it off, yeah.
It snapped her off.
Yeah.
But they got that fixed now, and they've got a code 0 now.
And Grant, stick with the sails for the moment. Do you have a heavy weather sails and light weather sails, or?
Yeah, you got a range of jibs.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got a range of jibs as you come down. And like the catamarans, you know, like the sail GP boats, you end up on a really low aspect little jib. And again, that's once you're foiling, you want to you increase your force, but lower your center of effort.
Mm. And crew numbers, 11, is it? Is that right?
11, yeah. Interesting. You can either have all the crew to windward, and if you do that, then the crew are swapping sides each tack. But if you have the crew all to windward, then your center of mass, the center of gravity of the boat, moves aft. So you need more vertical force on your rudder. And if you have more vertical force on your rudder, you reduce your riding moment. Or like the New Zealanders and the Italians had their crew fixed on either side well forward in the boat. And it's actually good because, one, you move your center of mass of the whole boat with crew further forward. And secondly, you're not losing power in the maneuvers when you need it most, with people swapping sides. And so that's one thing. The crew are controlling everything basically above the water. All the sail functions are controlled by the crew, and the foils, the flap, your rudder rake, the cant is done with a battery.
Right. But there's someone operating that, obviously, to get the angles right. And,
you have a pilot, like the sail GP boats, you have to have a pilot that's flying the boat.
Well, you see, a question that is often asked, you see the grinders grinding away. And we saw last time in Bermuda, the New Zealanders were pedaling away, but that's not allowed this time. But just explain what those grinders are doing. You see them grinding and nothing appears to be happening, but there's a lot happening below. Just explain exactly what those grinders are doing for us.
Well, the boats have several hydraulic pumps linked to the drivetrain, and we've got accumulators as well, so we can store some energy, so we have more oil, pressured oil, to use in a maneuver. So they could be grinding and just recharging accumulators, or they could be grinding, for instance, a function at the top of the rig that controls the twist of the top of the mainsail. They could be grinding that mechanism. And the boats are quite, they're inherently pretty unstable. If you think of it foiling, we're only on 2 foils. So as we roll, as we heel more, our pitch is changing at the same time. So it's quite, those falls are being driven with battery power, but our sail forces are changing all the time as we're rolling and pitching. So we're adjusting the mainsail a hell of a lot.
So you go through grinders pretty quickly, would you? I mean, if there's 2 races a day, do you swap the crews a bit?
Yeah, you swap a couple. Yeah, you swap a couple.
Yeah. Well, just looking at the America's Cup in itself, the next one, the 36th America's Cup, you've got the Defender New Zealand and the 3 challengers. I mean, you look at the personnel, both on and off the water, sailing in these boats. I mean, it's a who's who of yachting, isn't it, really? I mean, Ineos with Ben Ainsley, 4 Olympic golds, a silver medal. You've got Dean Barker, you've got Jimmy Spithill, and you've got Peter Burling. I mean, multiple world titles, gold medals everywhere. It's going to be an exciting event, as it always is, isn't it? And it's unknown because you won't line up against yourself till December against other boats.
Yeah, that's the weird thing. And, we all know the reason why these regattas were not on this year, but it would have been nice to check in. All the teams would have loved to have checked in.
Yeah.
And now you won't really check in till the 4th quarter of this year,
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. So it'll be interesting to see the second boats, that's for sure. but don't give too much away there. Now, I'll come back to more America's Cup, but I want to talk about you specifically. Is that all right?
People are much more interested in the America's Cup.
Well, they might be interested in a few stories, I'm sure you can tell, but my homework tells me that you started off in Manly Juniors and Cherubs.
Yeah.
And then you graduated to the lightweight Sharpies.
Yeah.
And won 2 national titles in the lightweight Sharpies. And I think in 1977, you were the first junior to win the national titles that was in Perth. Then you won again in 1979 in Sydney.
Yeah.
A boat called Ship of Fools.
That's right.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Ship of Fools.
Is that appropriate to Donnie Buckley and
Grover? Yeah, actually, we had a good squad. We had Don Buckley, who many people on this call would know.
The Admiral.
Donnie, and a guy called Jeff Grover, who sadly is no longer with us. But we had, anyway, we just sort of gelled as a really good crew. And yeah, we were quite fast. And we won in Perth, which was a great regatta.
Yeah. Well, when you look at the people that have won the Sharpie titles, there's a bloke called Jay Bertrand. He won in 1968, your old mate, or our old mate. And then 4-time winner was John Cuneo.
Yeah.
Who went on to win a Dragon Gold medal in Munich in 1972, and then subsequently was one of the co-helms with Alan Bond in his first challenge on Southern Cross in 1974. And the other co-helmsman was our great friend Sir James Hardy, who I know is watching tonight. So hello to you, Jim and Joni down in Adelaide. We hope you're well. So there's a bit of history for you, Grant.
Yeah, but Jim sailed heavyweight Sharpies, you know that.
Yes, I do know that.
Yeah.
I do know that. But anyway, there you go.
The young blokes these days would look at a lightweight Sharpie and think, bloody hell, what were they thinking?
But meanwhile, you had an engineering degree and you were out in the wilds of Northern Territory in the 1980s. Then you ended up sailing in the Admiral's Cup trials in 81 with Bondi. How did that all come about? You're an engineer.
Yeah, I was working at Ranger Uranium. We were building the plant at Ranger Uranium as a young engineer.
Where's that? Uluru somewhere, is it?
Yeah. No. Jabiru. Yeah, and fantastic. It was the Wild West, really. We used to go into Darwin on a Saturday night, spend Sunday with a massive hangover and get back on site Monday, Sunday night. It was fantastic. But Bertram called me and said, we're building this Admiral's Cup boat, and would you like to get involved with that and come and, sail on the boat? And that was Apollo 5. And it was kind of a training ground for the America's Cup. And I really hadn't done that much big boat sailing. I mean, it wasn't that big. It was a 43-footer. But we went and did the Admiral's Cup that year, and then the Hobart race, and then Bondi and John asked if I would go to Perth and get involved building Challenge 12 and Australia 2 in Perth. And Bondi gave me a job as an engineer because it was like that in those days. So I worked at a place called Whiteman's Bricks, making bricks, putting in a gas-fired kiln at a brickworks, and then on the weekend going into Wardies to try and help building a 12-metre, of which I wasn't much help at.
And then, well, obviously you stuck with it, and the rest is history, as they say. But look, Grant, there's been books written, stories told about the 83 Cup when we won. And, it'll go down as one of the great days in Australian history, not only sport. But just give us an overview of that last race, the last leg. You went round the final leeward mark in front and then just had to waddle your way up to the finish. What was the atmosphere like on the boat? Was it tense, relaxed? Did you know you had it won, or just talk us through that?
Oh, it was tense.
I think Huey's listening as well, so you better be careful here.
No, Huey was he was in his element, actually. Yeah. And there was a lot of tacks up that beat, and we weren't Australia 2 was a good boat attacking, but we weren't particularly faster than them. So we ended up with, you know, just matching him in the classic match racing style. And we actually ended up into the spectator fleet off to the right of the finishing line. And I'm going to Huey, we can lay, Huey, we can lay from here, you know. Huey's going, oh, fuck that. we just keep hammering them, you know.
Yeah.
And eventually he gave in and we kind of reached to the finish. But yeah, it was actually really cool on board. It was surprisingly, but don't forget we'd been ready to lose. You know, we could have lost a couple of days before that.
Yeah, sure.
You know, it was 3-1 for several days. And it had gone on for a long time. So it was the first time really that the Americans were facing defeat that day.
Yeah. And I think you probably didn't realise the impact it had at the time back here. I mean, it was just unbelievable, the scenes back here.
Yeah. It's actually, we didn't realise, Warren Jones, who was our manager, is a fantastic guy, fantastic. He sort of said, oh, we don't need newspapers in the crew house. And, you know, he just kind of, we were just happily riding our bikes down to the base and going out sailing every day and a bit oblivious to it.
Yeah.
And John always had to front up to the press conferences, which was bloody hard work, you know, getting hammered in the press conference every night. So it was taking its toll on him as it would for anyone, really.
Sure. Yeah. I remember Jim Hardy always said, don't read the newspaper because you're making the news. You know what's happened. You don't need someone else to tell you what might have happened because you know what happened. And that's what happens, isn't it? That's
Sir
true.
James, he's full of wisdom, mate.
Yes, he still is. So we're back. We won the America's Cup. You're back home. And then North Sails appeared on the horizon. Tell us how that all came about with you and Michael Coxon.
Tom Schnackenberg said, there's an opportunity. He rang me and said, there's an opportunity and maybe you should think about doing this. We'd come back from the Cup. I was working in North Sydney as a consulting engineer again. And I sort of, John Marshall then called me, he was the current president of North Sails. And Dave Forbes, he got involved and said, oh, you know, you should think about doing this. And I hadn't even met Coco, had never met Coco. So we go down there and meet Coco, and the two of us were sort of not getting on that well at first, you know, sort of thrust together. And, you know, ultimately we ended up being great mates. And that was a fantastic business, incredibly successful over the years. How
did you find the business? I know the company, or the sales the company made, North Sails, they were in high demand because they're such a world-class product, but yourself and Michael Coxon were in high demand as sailors. So how, you know, if someone came along and said, look, I want you to sail on a boat and I'll buy all your sails, there must be masses of people that did that. How did you sort of manage that?
With every season, we'd sort of figure out how we do it. And, you know, Coco's still doing it to this day, really. In a way, it was good because you got to sail on a lot of boats, but you were always worried about the sails as well as doing a good job as a tactician or whatever other, you know. Normally, both Coco and I'd sail as tactician on those boats. Old Benny Lexon said once, he was telling me, don't do it, you know, because he said, you got to work all week so you can work all weekend. That's the life of a sailmaker. Yeah.
God bless him, Well, then you joined a great sailor, a CYC sailor, Peter Kurtz, in '85 for the Admiral's Cup on Drake's Prayer.
Yeah.
And then...
with the big fella, and you?
Beg your pardon?
With the big fella?
Yeah, that's right. Ian Murray was there,
Yeah.
But then the '85 Hobart race. Tell us about that.
Well, firstly, it was really windy. As you'll remember, Pete, it was bloody windy. We seemed to be we were going upwind for days. with 3 reefs and a bloody number 4. And there was an incident at the start with Ragamuffin, of all boats, like it was a maxi, and we fended them off. They ran into the back of us on the back starboard quarter of the boat. And then when we finished, and we'd won on handicap, we were the provisional handicap winner, there was a third-party protest in relation to the incident at the starting line. And it was Forbesy who actually fended them off. Forbesy was on board too.
Yeah.
And we ended up getting disqualified from the race, which was hard because it was a bloody hard race, that race.
Yeah. Well, interestingly, after that, I mean, I just don't want to harp on it, but 150 boats on one starting line. And I remember at the briefing at the CYC, Gordon Marshall, the late Gordon Marshall, who was the race director, an engineer as well. Have a red wine, Grant.
Yeah,
right. He said at the briefing, he said, don't, in his matter-of-fact way, he said, don't tell me the bloody starting line's too short. I know it's too short. Just get on and do it. And subsequent to that, because that incident that year, Gordon developed the twin starting lines. And every year since, it's been used. And last year, the big year in the 75th, there was 4 starting lines. So that's the legacy of Gordon Marshall, I guess, but it came about through a very unfortunate incident. But anyway, we moved on, and then 87 loomed for the defence in Australia, in Fremantle and Perth, and you were back with Bondi's team again, but the Kookaburra boys just nipped you out and they became the defenders.
Yeah. I mean, Perth was probably one of the best cups ever.
Terrific. Last time at the 12 metres.
Yeah, fantastic venue. Lot of teams. Unbelievable time in Freo. Yeah, Australia 4. We had this Benny. The keel was a little bit weird. Had kind of a surfboard on the bottom of it. It was a stainless steel fin with a kind of a surfboard with winglets on it. And the beginning of the season was quite unseasonably light, and we managed to convince ourselves we needed more sail area. Benny actually got the proportions of the boat really good. So we actually cut the back of the boat, cut a wedge out of it near the aft end of the cockpit, and shorten the waterline so we could get more sail on the boat. And then, of course, sure enough, as we got towards the business end, the wind was bloody windy every day, and we needed waterline length and less sail. But the Kookaburras, Ian and Gilly and co did a really nice job. And State and Kidney, Sid's boat was really fast, was really fast. Better than our boat.
Yeah. So we moved then, I'll keep with the America's Cup theme. We moved to, John decided to get back involved, and One Australia syndicate came along, and the Cup by then was in San Diego. This is 1995.
Yeah.
And One Australia, there was a big team put together, and you were part of that team. And that ended in somewhat disaster when the boat sank. How did we go there? Were you on board that time when it sank?
No, it was the design coordinator. It's on the chase boat. Yeah, we had a really good team actually, but the Kiwis had done a much better job with the design of the boat. They were really quite a bit faster than us. But the second boat, 35, the second boat, AUS 35, was a lot better than our first boat, and it had an unusual keel structure on it. And so we were racing one day. It was quite windy and quite choppy, can be in San Diego. There was some debate whether we should race because the boat was fairly new and everything. And I still remember to this day saying, we should get out and, we'll break some stuff, but that'll be fine. We'll what's the worst that could happen? I literally said, what was the worst that could happen? I still remember doing it. And anyway, so eventually all the boys on the chase boat, and we came in with nothing. We had a jockey, I think we had a jockey pole. Those of you who know what a jockey pole is. We had a jockey pole and a bloody spinnaker. That was all that was left.
Yeah, gee.
And all the crew were were fine.
Yeah, yeah. But surprisingly, how quick the boat went down, wasn't it? It just disappeared.
Yeah. Snapped in half behind the kill fin. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's 25 years ago today since New Zealand won the America's Cup.
Oh, really?
San Diego.
Yeah. They had the all-star team. You know,
oh, yes.
Russell, Brad, Warwick, Simon. You know, unbelievable team.
And that great New Zealand broadcaster Peter Montgomery said, "The America's Cup is New Zealand's Cup." So 25 years ago today. There you go. A bit of boring trivia for you.
Yeah. They were incredibly strong.
Yeah.
A really good boat and really good crew.
Mm. So the Cup then went back to New Zealand for a couple of challenges, and then you joined Alinghi, the Swiss challenger in 2000. Well, for the 2003 Cup.
Yeah, that's right.
Again, how did that transpire?
Well, I was the design coordinator for Alinghi, and so we moved the whole family. Actually, left my mate Coco, left North Sales, and went to Switzerland in 2000. Really good team. Russell leading that team, and Ernesto Bertarelli, Brad Butterworth.
Russell Coots, Russell Coots.
Yeah. Really strong team.
Sorry, he'd had the fallout with New Zealand, hadn't he? So he took a lot of his key guys with him. To mount a challenge against New Zealand, and that caused a lot of animosity at the time.
Yeah, it was really ugly actually. When we eventually it took a while to get. The heart of the team was really the Kiwi thing, and then we had a group of designers, hardly any Kiwis in the design team, but Rolf Frolick was our principal designer, Dirk Kramer's the head engineer, Mike Schreiber, the sail designer. I mean, we had a really good design team, good group of guys. And but when we we had good boats. When we got to New Zealand, the fact that Russell and Brad and Warwick and Simon and a bunch of the key Team New Zealand guys had defected from them was pretty ugly. And there was a big campaign called the Loyal Campaign in New Zealand with billboards, and got to the stage where we needed security for all the key people in the team, because it was an ugly thing in the Cup history.
Yeah, but you were successful in 2003, and then in 2007 you defended in Valencia. Is that Valencia? Was that where the defence was?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
Alinghi again against Team New Zealand. Very close America's Cup. You know, old school long races and everything. But
and this was in the America's Cup class boat, wasn't it? The America's.
Yeah. Russell had left in 2003. Had an argument with Ernesto and left, and that left us in disarray for a year or two. But we had Ed Baird steering, as tactician and sort of leading the sailing team, and we won. But geez, only just. The Kiwis were strong, and they had a really good boat too.
Well, I think in the race that sealed the Cup for you was you won by 2 seconds or 1 second. New Zealand were leading, and
they had to do a penalty.
And then it was meant to be a run to the finish. You had to hoist headsails, but New Zealand had a penalty to do, and they were extended, but they had to do their penalty turn, and just by doing that in the light airs, you guys snuck home and won it by 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we then moved into multi-hulls with a 2010 defence in Valencia. Tell us about that massive trimaran versus a massive catamaran. Do you want to remember that or not?
Oh, it was a nightmare, really. It was all fought in the courts, and it was a nightmare. We built this catamaran, which was quite a lovely boat, really. It was 115 foot long, 90 foot wide, very big, powerful catamaran. We had a lot of trouble building the foils, and we're trying to get lift on the foils, but not foiling. And we had a lot of trouble with the structures and the builds of the foils. But anyway, eventually we raced, and Oracle had built a wing, and that was considerably better, particularly downwind than our boat, a lot faster. Mm-hmm. So that was called a D to gift match, only 2 races.
Yeah.
20 miles upwind and 20 miles downwind sort of thing. Nightmare. The whole thing was a nightmare. Yeah.
So to get over the nightmare, you joined Oracle.
Well, yeah. No, that was a while. That was a couple of years later. Yeah.
But I now want to talk about the 2013 America's Cup on San Francisco Bay. I mean, in sport, not alone yachting, in sport, it was one of the great comebacks of all time. I mean, it was first to win 9 races, and it was you against the New Zealanders. And the New Zealanders were leading 8-1.
Yeah.
So they had to win one more race. You had to win another 8. And in one race, when they looked as though they were going to win, the time limit ran out. So it looked easy peasy that, one more race and they were home. But somehow you guys dragged it back and you won. What happened? How did that occur?
Well,
we saw it happening, but you must have done something.
Well, yeah, we'd had a couple of things happen that we'd been beat up as a team. We had a big capsize with the first boat, massive capsize, and we got washed. We couldn't tow it. It was on it was on its side, and we couldn't tow it. And the tide was running that strong that we got swept out under the bridge. And then we're out into the Pacific, right? The tide's still going out. Blokes in the water trying to fix things and tow ropes, and then eventually the wing broke, and we busted one of the beams, and we could only come back that night towing the boat in at about 3 knots, but we basically only got back in because the tide changed, but that took us months to fix all that, and so as a team we'd kind of been beat up, and then we were building the second boat, and meanwhile we saw the Kiwis had figured out they could get the boats to foil, and they originally the rule was intended not for foiling, and then we saw them foiling, and it was clear we had to do that. So we're scrambling building foils that we could foil on, and we could only foil downwind, and then we were learning to do foiling jibes, all taking the lead from the Kiwis. But our boat was configured such that we could actually, and it was a bit to do with the aerodynamics of the platform, that as we got better at foiling, we could foil upwind. And we had to reconfigure the wing so to reduce center of effort, increase more power in the bottom of the wing. And during the Cup, we started to foil consistently upwind, and the Kiwis couldn't. So suddenly we're a lot faster upwind. And we literally had to win 9 races straight. I think it was 8 or 9 straight.
8, I think, yeah.
Yeah. And Jimmy and the boys were bloody solid, eh? And slingers. Jimmy, slingers. And then John Kostecki was the tactician. Mm. And Larry made us change, so we put Ben on as the tactician. And that was a good change. But it was kind of not the, JK is a great tactician, but it was a change that meant, hey guys, we're going down unless we do something dramatic here. And so we did that, and we had bits breaking every day, and we just hung them together, and it went on and won. And it was, to be fair to the Kiwis, must have been bloody heartbreaking to go down from such a big lead.
Yeah, no, it was a remarkable comeback, remarkable, and it was enthralling television to watch it.
Yeah,
the way it unfolded. Well, Grant, I just
they were great
now
boats,
that
actually, the 72s were really good boats.
yeah, I just want to talk about a few personalities now that the syndicate heads that you've been involved with. I mean,
The time, Pete. Bloody hell.
it's all right. You're all right. You'll get dinner. Mr. Zimmer will be all right. Now, see, I mean, America's Cup syndicate heads, or call them what you like, the blokes that stump up the money. I mean, they all had a passion, but they all had an ego, and they were all different. And some of them had buckets of money, some probably didn't have as much as they thought they had or whatever. So, you look at Bondi, Bertarelli, Larry Ellison, and now Jim Ratcliffe. Just a thumbnail sketch on each. Bondi first.
Bondi. Shit. What a character. What a character, and passionate about the cup. I mean, a rogue, in the end, clearly in a business sense, a rogue, but he did a lot of racing, did the Admiral's Cup with us. I've done a couple of Hobarts with him. Hell of a character. Passionate about Australia, passionate about sailing, looking after the boys. And incredibly good to me. Ernesto Bertarelli is a real gentleman, lovely guy, great, good sportsman, sailed on board the boat. We, Capey and I had to train him in navigation because he was going to be the navigator. You can imagine Brad going, oh my God. But Ernesto was good. He was good. Ernesto's loved it, loves the sport, really good with the guys, had his family involved. I think he'll do the cup again, Ernesto. He's going to have to do it again one of these days.
Yeah. Larry Ellison.
Larry, passionate about the cup, passionate about sailing. A lot more removed than the other guys from the team, just because of the way he lives his life. But we didn't see him very much at all, Larry. But when we did, he knew everything that was going on, so he's always well informed.
Yeah.
And then in the next part, Ben met Jim Ratcliffe. Famously, literally got a call, I'd like to meet you and talk about what you're doing. So this guy, Jim Ratcliffe, who we didn't really know, and Ben said, oh, this guy wants me to have a beer. I'm going to go and have a beer with him. So he goes in and meets him in a pub, and in London. And Jim says to Ben, yeah, I'm pretty interested. You need to build 2 boats. You need to do it properly if you're going to do it. And we've got to win, you got to win for Britain and bring this cup back to the UK. And next thing you know, we're in his office having a meeting with him, and he literally says, well, just tell me how much money you need to do it properly. Come back and tell me how much money you need properly. I don't want to do it with other people. If I'm going to do it, I'll do it all myself. So we literally, that was the second meeting. And turns out Jim is an absolute character and the wealthiest guy in the UK. A really keen sportsman, runs marathons, walked to the North and the South Pole, full-on cyclist, skier. He's incredible what he's built. His business, he's built it all in 20 years.
What is the company, Grant? What does it do? What do you guys do?
Plastics, largely plastic feedstocks, and oil and gas as well.
Right. And has he got a tie up with the Tour de France cycling?
Yeah, he bought Team Sky, which is now Team Ineos.
Right.
He funds that as well.
Right.
Yeah.
And I just getting back to your syndicate, I noticed that you've linked up with the Mercedes Formula One team, and you've got 18 engineers from that group helping you. Is that correct?
Yeah. The situation is that Jim said, "You guys are like Formula One 10 years ago. You know, you're a bit hit and miss. You're a bit trial and error. You need to learn from Formula One." So he did a deal with Formula One with Mercedes, who have an applied sciences division, and they are providing us with services in various areas, from modelling to engineering, to actually the systems guys as well. And Formula One is going through a difficult time because of the virus and, you know, this season, but also they're struggling keeping the smaller teams in. So they use pretty stringent budget restrictions. And that means that they're shedding into a applied sciences or a sort of a engineering service. So we're using that. And it's been really good for us.
Well, I don't know whether American Magic are trying to out-Trump you, but Terry Hutchison said the other day that they're using Airbus, and they've got 37 engineers. So there you go.
Well, we had Airbus with us in Bermuda.
Right. Okay.
So that they probably have all the guys that we trained up.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. Now, I'm trying to, now, Nick Jansen, you may have to come in here for some questions. Nick, I'm not seeing that many. Does that mean no one wants to talk to Grant, or am I looking at the wrong hole?
Sleep, Pete.
No, I can absolutely read out the questions. We've got quite a few in our little panel that I might feed to you, Grant, but Peter, if you can, I guess, back up any questions. Do you have 5 minutes or so to run through a couple of the attendees' questions, Grant?
Yeah. Let's go.
Okay, so we've got a question from Scott Alley. Can you ask Grant about the new keg on the bottom of Britannia?
Skeg. It's the
Skeg. He changed it to Skeg. Yeah.
Yeah, Skeg. And that's it looks a bit ropey, but we wanted to test. With these boats, you touch down. When you do a touchdown, you need to use a bit of volume in the bustle. So you take the load off the foil and carry a bit of the weight of the boat on the bustle. And I said earlier that the Kiwis and the Italians have got bustles, so we wanted to experiment with a bustle. It's only small in this boat because we had to get the boat still to measure and how it would trim with that extra volume. But so we use it now, tacking, you do a little touchdown on the bustle rather than the whole wetted surface of the hull. Right.
So, Grant, could I just throw a question in here? How the starting, it's just windward leeward courses, aren't they, the proposed for the Cup itself?
Yeah.
So how do you envisage the start to be? Is it just put the pedal down and go, or time starts, or is it
a short sequence, a short start sequence?
Right.
We're going to have to. We haven't seen the rules yet, actually, on what manoeuvring you're allowed. But in the pre-start, you probably don't want to fall off your foils. So you'll see people manoeuvring to stay on their foils.
Sure.
If you're able to position yourself to luff your opponent and get him to drop off your foils, that'd be a big game. Yeah.
Over to you, Nick.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm back on. We've got a question from Matt. What is the best piece of AC apparel you have ever received, and is it still in your possession? White sunnies from '83, for example?
I don't know. I do have a lot of clothing that I haven't paid for. I have a little collection of Australia 2 clothing. God knows what I'm going to do with it. Sell it at a sports auction or something.
Look, we won't be able to.
Hey, a pair of stubby shorts.
Yeah, that's the guy.
Look at those photos. What were we thinking? Yeah. Damien liked short shorts. Yeah, he was into it.
Still does. He still does.
Yeah.
We've got a question from Skelly. What do you think about the Advanced Syndicate in '83? I was a sailmaker in Sydney for them at the time. From Skelly.
Advance in 1983, they painted a black nose on it.
Leave it at that.
Yeah.
Leave it at that.
We've just had one recently come in from Sabosaurus. Call me an ignoramus, Sabosaurus says, but what is the provision for capsize recovery during the Cup, assuming both teams put it in?
You've lost the race if you capsize. The boats were designed, you put both foils all the way down, and there was meant to be enough weight in those foils to right the boat, but you normally need a chase boat as well to self-right, or tow the boat into the wind and get wind under the mainsail, and you get enough lift from the main to right the boat. That's assuming you don't have a violent capsize. So far, only one boat's capsized, the Kiwis, and they were really efficient at riding the boat.
I'm sure Sabosaurus is very appreciative of your time and detail for that answer. Thank you very much, Grant. Pete, did you have anything final? It's been a very comprehensive question and answer session, and thanks again for your time, Grant.
No, just before Grant goes, there's one question from Scott Alley again. Grant, can you hear me?
Yeah.
He says, I read that Jason Carrington receives new plans, changes every day to the second boat. Given the level of tech and software design tools, a lot of people might find that surprising. Is the America's Cup too technical these days?
It's kind of two questions. One, Jason doesn't get new drawings every day. Interestingly, if you ask Rolf Frolick, now with computer modelling, boat builders require detailed drawings of every component. So there's literally thousands of drawings for a boat.
Yeah.
A few years, 10 years ago, there was only 3 or 4 drawings and you'd build a 50-footer from there.
Yeah.
I think Benny did thousands of drawings.
Right.
The builders had a lot more scope, but is the America's Cup too technical? The answer is this boat is a very challenging technical boat. And probably in the world we're in today, it's clearly not the right solution for the environment we're in, but who would have known this was going to happen to the world?
Yeah.
We do have one late question from the great Lindsay May, obviously a veteran of the Rolex Sydney Hobart. He asks, what about safety for crew?
Good to hear from Lindsay, but it is a risk as the G-forces are quite high. But as a bonus, the crew being in the cockpits are quite well protected. So interestingly, the crew further aft are the ones with more of a risk of getting thrown around. But the foreign crew in the deep cockpits are quite well protected.
Okay, well, we might wrap it up there. Grant, one final question. What's next?
Me? Shit, I don't know. Just try to navigate our way through this COVID-19 crisis, keep trying to be competitive. Yeah. Almost for sure the Cup's going to be on in March. And, you've got to be ready. That's the thing about these projects. You can't say, I need 2 months delay or whatever. You've got to be ready and your boat's got to be fast.
But have you got another Cup in you after this?
Probably not.
Well, it's about time.
I'm actually, you know, like I'm older than our crew's fathers, so you know, it's frightening, really.
It's about time you got a real job anyway.
Yeah.
All right. Well, look, it's been terrific, Grant. We go back a long way, but it's always great to talk and hear the stories again. And so travel well and safely, and we wish you every success. Certainly getting back to the UK and certainly in New Zealand next year. And let's hope that you might have another victory on your belt. So thanks again, and all the very best.
Thanks, Pete. Thanks, everyone.
All right, Nick, well, that's about it. And thank you. And as Grant said, thanks for everyone for watching, and we'll see you next time.
And from the club, thank you very much from the bottom of our hearts to Peter Shipway and to Grant Simmer. Some wonderful feedback already being emailed to us. Thank you very much for everyone attending. There is a link in the chat box to next week's session, but hopefully this won't be the last we see of Grant Simmer online for the club in this very unusual, unprecedented COVID-19 period. Grant, Peter, thanks once again for your time and for everyone attending.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, good night.